You're listening to the Potaholics Comedy Network. Potaholics.com.
This week on Codex, A History of Video Games, we talk about the New York launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System. We go into some detail on Nintendo's competition and how they got here. We talk a little bit about Super Mario Brothers, and we give you a little crash course on Nintendo's licensing scheme for the NES and their quality control and how they were able to make sure the video games were good.
Welcome to Codex, A History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I am Tyler Osby.
And today we're talking about Chapter 18 in the Ultimate History of Video Games, titled The Seeds of Competition.
That's right. This is sort of part 2 of our Famicom
Nintendo.
Yeah, our Famicom series. Not that we do series on things.
Mini-series.
Yeah, our Famicom mini-series. So we talked about the Famicom last week and how it got started in Japan. Now we're going to talk about the Nintendo Entertainment System and how it found its legs in the United States. So we go back to 1985.
Good year.
New York City. Is that when you were born?
No, 88.
Oh, okay.
I feel like any 80s are a good time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I was going to try to make up a Hamilton thing for New York City, 1985, with Aaron Burr, Sir, that second song, but I couldn't come up with anything.
See, and I took it as winter 1985, New York City. Very.
It's got some Snake Plissken.
Yeah, a little noirish kind of,
Yeah. So at this point in time, Jack Tramiel had announced that Atari was going to leave the home console business and focus on home computers because they were done with video games, but they were not done with computers. So, it's time to grow up, get a real job at the business factory.
I remember when I grew up and went to the business factory.
That's right. Did many businesses. Coleco at this point in time also had abandoned their Atom computer that had screwed up Atari's deal with Nintendo. Actually, Nintendo's attempt to get Atari to sell the Nintendo Entertainment System in the United States. If you recall, Atari was gonna do it. They were on board. And then they saw that Coleco was using Donkey Kong to show off their Atom computer. And Atari was mad about that because they thought they had the rights to Donkey Kong, when really they only had the cartridge rights to Donkey Kong and not the floppy disk rights, right?
It's the other way around.
Oh, dang it.
Atari had the floppy disk rights. Coleco had the cartridge rights.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same. Yeah,
yeah.
It's essentially what happened. They fighting over who had the license to what.
They thought Nintendo was sort of double-crossing them.
Yeah, how dare you, sir?
You can't just offer us exclusivity, but then give it to someone else also.
It's so weird when you think about that these big corporations are fighting over a game involving a gorilla capturing a princess that's throwing barrels down a slanted hill.
Yeah, so Coleco had given up on the Atom computer, so womp womp. And so they were trying to stay afloat on their Cabbage Patch Kid money, because if you recall, they had sort of stumbled into this Cabbage Patch Kid fad that was kind of running its course at this point in time.
Creepy dolls. How do you feel about dolls? Are you creeped out by them?
A little bit.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the world that we find ourselves in right now in 1985. This is when Nintendo sent a strike team to New York to try and sell the NES, because they figured if you can make it here, kid, you can make it anywhere.
It's good accent work.
Thanks. I've been to New York. Never.
Me neither. Let's go one time.
So they gave him $5 million in walking around money just to see what happens. They stayed in New York for about 3 months. It was tough goings for a little while there for the humble video game manufacturer. The bottom had fallen out of the market in 1982, and it was still pretty tough to get anybody to take you seriously. If you were going around a store saying, hey, we got this cool new video game thing, just didn't want nothing to do with that.
Video games? No.
Yeah, that fad's gone.
No one likes those anymore. That's what the newspaper tells me.
Right. It's all about Cabbage Patch Kids, and even those are done. See? Because everybody in New York is a mobster.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Or they are a villain that tie people to train tracks. Because it's the same kind of voice.
They're twiddling their mustaches. Yeah. So, yeah, it was tough to be a video game manufacturer at this point in time. And the fad was over. People figured this was done. Nintendo did some stuff to differentiate themselves. They had the light gun that we talked about for Hogan's Alley. The Zapper. Yeah. That was used for Hogan's Alley, and later it would be used for Duck Hunt. They had the robot that was pretty neat because it could see what was going on the screen and sort of react, which was pretty cool. So what they were telling people was that they were selling an entertainment system, not a video game system. At this point in time, it's important to note we do not have Super Mario Brothers yet.
No Super Mario Brothers.
No Super Mario Brothers, which, as we all know, is a bit of a game changer. But they didn't have that yet, so it was they were having a hard time selling this thing. But what Nintendo did to make this happen was they put their money where their mouth was. They offered retailers that any unsold inventory could be sold back to Nintendo. So there was no risk for a retailer to jump in. Like, the only thing they had to risk was the floor space.
Yeah.
Nintendo was like, look, if people don't buy these things, we'll buy them back from you. We'll even set up the display. We'll bring them in. We'll set up the display. We'll do it all. All you need to do is give us a spot on your floor. So that was kind of a deal that most retailers couldn't quite pass up. It was like, they were guaranteed to not lose money at least. So Nintendo was able to set up the NES in hundreds of stores around New York. They worked day in and day out. During the day, they were hustling, selling these things to stores. At night, they were setting up the displays. They were getting these things ready to go and get sold to the masses.
So they were like marketing crew and like the night shift stocking inventory crew at the same time. It's crazy.
They really busted their butts on this one. They sold about 50,000 units, which was about half of what they had shipped to Japan. So it wasn't a huge hit, but they were doing okay. This wasn't bad. What it proved was that video games were not dead, and that Yamauchi, the head of Nintendo Co. Limited in Japan, was right. He thought video games were not dead, and he was correct. They sold 50,000 of these things in New York. And most retailers that were carrying them before Christmas opted to keep selling them after Christmas.
They're like, hey, this is working. It's crazy.
Yeah.
This pixelated gorilla is just crushing it on all angles.
That's right. So what they decided to do was take the show on the road and head to the West Coast, Los Angeles.
Ooh, you heard it here first, folks. West Coast, Best Coast.
West Coast,
Tyler,
Best Coast. Mm-hmm.
We're biased.
Yes. So by February, RoccoW, he's the head of Nintendo of America, he had expanded and started selling in Los Angeles. It was a little bit easier here because I say here because we're in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we're currently in the Valley, the beautiful San Fernando Valley.
That's right. So it was a little bit easier here for them. They had a proven track record from selling these machines in New York. They could point to New York and say, hey, look, we sold 50K of these things. We gave these retailers a sweet deal. We'll give you the same sweet deal. You got nothing to lose here. And it's not even that big a risk because
like
we're
right
good.
Now, you were telling us that, and you kept that New York accent, like they'd kept some of it, because when you go somewhere for a couple of months, you keep the accent for a little bit.
Right.
And they're like strong-arming these LA people with their New York accents.
That's right. Eventually,
adding that to the history. I don't know if that's true.
Eventually, they would get their surfer accents. And they'd be like, yo, dude. Bruh, if you just sell these Nintendos, you make a ton of money.
You could get that fresh Donkey Kong gnar, brah.
Yeah. And then we'll build you a surfing game. I don't think they actually did build them a surfing game. So they found some success in Los Angeles, and they expanded to Chicago and San Francisco. Things are looking great. Their test markets are out of control. Everybody knows the NES is great.
I'm not even there, and I'm excited for them right now.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
So we're going to take a little visit back to our good buddy, Jumpman.
Ooh.
Jumpman from Donkey Kong. He became Mario by the time Donkey Kong Jr. had rolled around, where Mario was the bad guy this time. He takes DK, and Jr.'s got to go save him. It is widely speculated that the Jr. in Donkey Kong Jr. is the Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong Country.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Cranky Kong is the OG Donkey Kong.
Really?
That's the speculation. I don't know if this is confirmed or if this is canon.
I think we could have a whole episode discussing the Donkey Kong family tree.
Oh, I'm sure
Dixie
we could.
Kong, you got Diddy Kong.
You can go deep into... There's like a fan theory that's like there was a big war between gorillas and humans or something. And it's sort of like the circumstantial evidence sort of backs it up. You're like, oh, shoot, this makes sense.
I would love if... down the road, we could get to maybe some weird lore episodes of certain video games we like, because I'm all about that. I'm super into that.
And fan theories.
Oh, yeah.
We should do a show on fan theories, too.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah. This will be great.
Sorry, back to Jumpman.
Who had become Mario. In 1983, Mario Brothers was released in arcades. That's when Luigi shows up. That's the pipe cleaning one. This is not Super Mario Brothers. I want to be clear again. This is
where they're like it's like you're against the other player and you're kicking.
Yeah. And there's like Koopas and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's all right, but it's definitely still like an old style single screen arcade game that was also on the 2600. So that was in arcades and it was doing okay. Enter Super Mario Brothers.
I wish we had an air horn. Not to have in the microphone. That would be inappropriate for the ears of the listener. But, just to have I could put a sound effect in. I might do it. Who knows? What time are we at? You keep going.
This is a game that truly needs no introduction. We've all played Super Mario Brothers, so I'm not going to go into great detail on what Super Mario Brothers is. It's super crazy to me, though, that you think about this game, which is pretty simple by today's standards. You run to the right side of the screen, you jump on stuff, you beat Bowser, whatever. It was revolutionary at the time. This was huge. I mean, lots of games had done some of this stuff like side-scrolling and having sort of realistic physics. It didn't do a lot of new things, but it took all those things of these other games and it did them to just such a high degree of quality that it was like it truly became greater than the sum of its parts. And it even had a lot to offer even after you finished the game. After you put King Koopa in the lava, after you rescued the princess and she wasn't in another castle anymore, there was still Easter eggs to find. There were extra lives, coins you could find, different passageways, warp pipes. There was some like...
Ooh, the warp pipes.
Yeah.
Where you're in the underground level and then you jump on top of the map and you run across it. That was crazy as a kid.
Yep. And there's like some weird glitch stuff you could do that would like take you to this weird and never-ending underwater level.
Oh, yeah.
That could be a whole episode in and of itself, like glitches or prominent glitches in games, because that's one of the coolest ones. Super Mario Brothers really kind of changed the game, and it was easy to say. This game defined the difference between the older generation games and the newer generation of games. When you looked at Super Mario Brothers, you knew you were looking at something different, something newer, something that other systems couldn't do or didn't do, at least. I don't know if they couldn't do it. So like at this point, it's like games are never going to look the same. The NES had done it. And stroke of genius, they started packing in Super Mario Brothers with all NES systems. They were like, everybody's buying this game anyway, we might as well just include it in the box.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Nintendo's the best with that too.
Yeah. So they did the same thing with the Wii when Wii Sports came out.
And they had, I think Mario 64 was released bundled with the N64 when it first came out.
Yeah, there were bundles. Yeah, the N64 only had 2 games when it came out, so it was like that or Pilot Wings, which was a cool game too.
I never played Pilot Wings.
That's all right. It's fun. I played a lot of it. It has cool hang gliding stuff.
Going to the future though. We got to bring it back.
Bring it back. Back to 1986. They started packing it in the end of 1986, just in time to take the NES National. That's what's the weird thing about it. Is like we always think about, what was the first game released on the NES? Well, obviously Super Mario Brothers. It came with it, right? But it only came with it shortly after they started going national, or shortly before they started going national with it. In all these test markets in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in San Francisco, they didn't have Super Mario Brothers.
It came with Duck Hunt and Hogan's Alley, though.
I don't think it came with anything.
Oh, you just got the Zapper and the Rob, and you had to buy games on the side.
It maybe came with Gyromite for Rob or Hogan's Alley. Yeah, that's a good question. What the original pack-in games were.
I've never played Hogan's Alley, by the way. I was strictly a Duck Hunt guy.
Yeah, Duck Hunt.
Because eventually they had the cartridge that was Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers attached on the same cartridge.
Yeah.
That's what I had.
Yeah, they had that one, and then they had the cartridge that was Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet, which had the pad that you run on the ground.
I never played with the pad.
Oh, man. That was fun. I played a lot of that with my buddy. Like, we spent a whole weekend just running on this pad.
It's the only way they can get nerds to exercise.
Yeah, and then when you figured out the secret where you could just get on your hands and knees and just, like, slam on it with your hands. Yeah, that was really fun.
I hit the table. I'm sorry, listener.
It's okay. So I want to talk about another company that Nintendo went into business with. See, because remember, they tried to get Atari to sell the NES. They tried to get them to license the NES and build it and sell it. When they couldn't get Atari, they went to a company called Worlds of Wonder, which ironically was formed by 5 ex-Atari employees. And so Worlds of Wonder was kind of a toy company. They made a couple of different things. They had something that they knew was definitely going to be a hit called Teddy Ruxpin, which was a teddy bear that could play cassette tapes, and when you played the cassette tape, the bear's like mouth would move, so it was like it was telling you the story on the tape, or singing you the song.
Kind of terrifying, but awesome at the same time.
Super terrifying, but it was a hit in 1985. It was like one of those toys. It was like, this is the toy, and it's always sold out, and it's like being marked up on not eBay, but whatever eBay was at the time, the classified section.
Yeah, I guess it classifies as a newspaper.
Yeah, the giant nickel.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was in 1985. Anyway, they had a hit. They made toys. In 1986, they did it again. Laser tag was the hit of the holiday season, and again, stores couldn't keep it in stock. So these guys are doing okay. They know what they're doing when it comes to marketing toys and things like that. So this was very attractive to our boy RoccoW over in Nintendo of America. In 1986, he wanted to strike a deal with Worlds of Wonder and get the NES sold nationwide. The deal that he struck with Worlds of Wonder, or WOW for short, which is a great acronym. It was different.
So good, someone else used it.
Yeah. It was way different from Atari's deal. So with Atari, Nintendo wanted them to just license the technology for the NES. Atari would have to make it themselves, and they would have to sell it as if it were an Atari product. It would be like the Atari NES, maybe. I don't know what they were going to call it. The idea was Nintendo would just kind of sit back and collect those fat stacks of money while Atari did all the building and the marketing and all the work, basically. But with Worlds of Wonder, RoccoW knew that he just wanted them to be a distributor, mostly because he knew he had a hit on his hands and he wanted to be the one
making all the money.
Because in that deal, probably Atari would be the one to make more money if they had gone through with that. But RoccoW knew he had a success here. He knew he could sell these things if he could just get them into stores. And that's a hard thing to do, especially in the 80s, is get your product into stores. So RoccoW figured that if he was associated with such hits as Teddy Ruxpin and Laser Tag, that he could go to any store and be like, look, or like Worlds of Wonder could basically go to any store and be like, look, we have these hits. This is our next one. It's the NES. That's our next hit, right? The folks that had come from Atari, they thought this was a bad idea. They had already been there and done that with video games. They were over it. They did not want to go down that road again. But the head of Worlds of Wonder decided, you know what? You guys are wrong, and we're going to do it anyway. So they did.
What a great decision in hindsight.
Yeah, it was a pretty good decision there. So at this point, Nintendo, the way we're talking about it, seems like maybe Nintendo had no competition. That's not exactly true. They weren't the only company, especially not the only Japanese company, trying to make a splash in the United States in the video game world. Sega had their Master System, and they wanted to compete head-on with Nintendo. The Master System, or the Mark III as it was called in Japan, because they had two consoles previous to it in Japan, it was actually a better piece of hardware. They'd had 2 more years to develop it because Nintendo built the NES, remember, in like 1982, 1983, and it's like 1986 now, 1987 in the United States. So we're like 5 years later. Technology's come a long way. The Master System capitalized on about 2 of those years, so they had more time to develop better hardware. But the Master System had no games.
No games. The no games conundrum. There's a lot of things I kind of want to write down, the things we've realized from like no games is a big thing that comes up a lot. Shady business deals comes up a lot.
Yeah. You know? So Nintendo straight up crushed Sega in Japan because they had the games. And they really wanted to do the same thing in the United States. So spoiler alert, Nintendo did.
Go Nintendo, go.
At least in this generation. When we get to the Super Nintendo Genesis generation, it's a little bit murkier. But we'll not get ahead of ourselves here. Sega's... What?
A little foreshadowing.
Oh, this next generation is a really like cutthroat time in video game politics. It's really fun. So Sega's marketing arm in America at this point in time, they just weren't as strong as Nintendo's. They'd made a lot of hit arcade games, and they were still putting a lot of effort into their arcade games, but nobody really seemed to know who they were. Atari had re-released the 7800 around this time, which was pretty cool because it could also play 2600 games, so it had a pretty big library to start with. But like when you put the 7800 next to the NES and next to the Master System, it was pretty clear which one was better.
You want to go with the better looking one.
That's right. And the
Atari's
NES
never really looked good.
No. And the NES had games.
Yeah, NES has games.
You got games. So, yeah. But it had no games. Master System was also like $10 more than the NES. And I mean, some of those games looked technically more impressive, but the problem is like people don't buy consoles to look at graphics. They buy them to play games. And graphics are part of that. It's not unimportant, but ultimately, if the game's no good, right? And then once Super Mario Brothers dropped in the United States, it was just game over for anybody who wasn't Nintendo. Like if you didn't have a game that could do what Mario Brothers did, and Sega didn't, Atari didn't. Yet, right? Well, we'll get ahead of ourselves.
I know, I'm getting ahead. I'm just getting so excited.
Yeah. If you were not Nintendo, you were having a bad time. So they were just crushing it. One of the things that enabled Nintendo to really crush it was their licensing scheme for the NES. This was the thing that really differentiated them from Atari. So if we go back to our video game crash, what was one of the biggest things that precipitated that? It was just a huge glut of terrible games.
E.T.
E.T., bad game. Pac-Man, great game in the arcade, bad game on the 2600.
Yeah.
So people were tired of playing bad games, and they didn't have a good way of knowing what games were good and what games were bad before they bought them. There's no internet at this time. There's maybe some magazines, but like that's for enthusiasts.
This is before Nintendo Power.
Right. So well before Nintendo Power. So what Nintendo did was they developed a licensing system. They didn't want anybody else making games for the NES unless they had a license from Nintendo. And Nintendo held an iron grip on these licenses. They needed a way to make sure that we didn't have all of this shovelware coming out like they did for the 2600. Yeah, I love
Shovelware.
it. They developed a chip called the 10NES, also known as the lockout chip, that sits inside the NES, and there's one inside the cartridge, and those chips need to make a connection in order for a game to boot on the NES. If you made a cartridge and you didn't have that chip in there, it wasn't going to boot. So the idea there was that the 10 NES chip was like a piece of proprietary software on it, so you couldn't just copy the chip, basically, because you needed that proprietary software that Nintendo would have had copyrighted, basically. So if you did that, you'd be in copyright violation.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's pretty brilliant.
Pretty smart, yeah.
Yeah, there were some companies that figured out ways around it, but this was largely very successful. So they had, like I said, they had an iron grip on this. They made the cartridges also in Japan. So when you released a game on the NES, you had to buy your cartridges from Nintendo, which ensured high quality, and it also ensured that Nintendo took a slice of that pie.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I love pie.
Yeah. And so in order to be able to get this license, you had to make good games because they also checked for quality. They had a large list of sort of restrictions here. They had no sexual or graphically violent content, which would sort of become relaxed later on. But right now it was about, this was a kids thing. We're making games for kids, right? A licensee, if you chose to become a licensee for the NES, you could only make games for the NES.
Ooh, locking them in.
Yeah. So that was a pretty big hurdle for some companies who wanted, like Electronic Arts and Acclaim and Activision. They wanted to be able to make things across different platforms. And if they signed a deal with this brand newfangled NES thing, they wouldn't be able to do that. So that restriction would, of course, become relaxed in later years as well. I think Nintendo would get a anti-competitive like lawsuit filed against them, and so they'd have to change some of these things. The other thing that is kind of interesting to note, of licensee could only make 5 games per year for the NES. If you had a license, you could only make 5 games per year, and that's to keep you from just shoveling out crappy games, right?
Here's ET2.
Right.
We done did terrestrial again.
Yeah, ET2 through 8 could not come out in the same year. And you had to place an order of at least 1,000 cartridges. I saw a number somewhere that said they were 10,000 cartridge minimums. Some numbers say they were 1,000 cartridge minimums. Anyway, there was a minimum order on the cartridges, and that made sure that it was like, look, you got to be serious here before you start releasing games on our console. So, and like a kind of notable thing about this, because Nintendo had such a hard grip on the manufacturing of these cartridges, in 1988, there was a shortage of DRAM and ROM chips that were used in cartridges. And so Nintendo was only able to approve like 25% of most developers' orders.
Whoa.
And they got to choose who got priority.
Based on the quality of the game and
Right.
matched all that stuff.
Or whatever other deals they had with them.
How much they liked them.
Right, exactly.
They got them good bagels at the parties, breakfast parties. Do people have breakfast parties?
Probably.
I love breakfast parties.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, these kinds of restrictions would carry over into the Super Nintendo era as well. They would change a lot, especially because they would need to get a little bit more competitive with things like Sega. But right now, they had all the cards and they were exercising that. Like I said before, some companies would figure out ways to get around this, and they actually sued a couple of different ones. Tengen is a company that's actually, I think it's an Atari brand. They had developed a way to get around this lockout chip.
Ooh.
What it did was it sent a high voltage current up into your Nintendo and disabled the chip.
Whoa, zapped it?
Yeah, zapped it until you restarted your NES.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So they didn't have to steal their copyrighted software to make their own chip. All they had to do was disable the chip.
That seems like so much work.
Yeah, well, they
do that.
They did that, and then they could make their own cartridges, and their cartridges definitely looked different from Nintendo cartridges, and they were able to retain all of their money, and they could sort of sidestep Nintendo.
I want to find one of these Zapper cartridges.
Anything by Tengen.
Tengen?
Tengen, yeah. There were some companies that would make cartridges that like you would plug in a legitimate Nintendo cartridge and then it would just sort of like bypass.
Like a Game Shark?
Kind of like a Game Shark, yeah.
I loved a Game
Shark. And it would use that cartridge's 10 NES chip to get around the thing. So that was like an interesting, novel way to do it. I'm not sure how the company that made the games, the Bible Adventures games, did it. Nintendo sued a lot of companies for doing this. They did not sue the company that made Bible Adventures because that's not a good look. If you're like, you don't want to be like suing the church, basically.
Especially for like 80s America.
Yeah, this is like not a good look for them. So they kind of let Bible Adventures do their own thing. They didn't want the PR nightmare associated.
Plus, I mean, how much fun could it really be?
Yeah, it wasn't.
I mean, like, you put a bunch of animals on an ark and then don't sink the boat.
They're not great games. Most of the games that got around this limitation were not
great. Yeah, I imagine.
I think Tengen probably had some good games, but so anyway, that's the little sidestep into the licensing thing, which we'll probably come back to in the future as these licensing terms change. But the TLDR too long didn't listen. Nintendo held iron fist over there. The games that came out on the system, nobody released a game on Nintendo unless Nintendo knew.
Total control.
And had approved it. Yeah. So in 1987, we're going to go back to our Worlds of Wonder partnership here.
I love them.
Yeah, they made Teddy Ruxpin, your favorite.
I love that creepy
They made Laser Tag, your other favorite.
I actually really do like Laser Tag.
You loved playing Laser Tag with your Teddy Ruxpin?
Yeah, I'd actually put him in the jacket and I'd just shoot him repetitively.
Yeah. And the tape you put in would be like some super cool 80s
like
synthwave.
80s rock.
Yeah. Yeah, and he would be singing like, I don't know.
Flock of Seagulls? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just any. He'd just sing any song from Grand Theft Auto Vice City while I shot him with a laser.
That's right. But by 1987, the fads were over. Teddy Ruxpin, Laser Tag were effectively dead. But the NES just kept on selling. People were loving it. Several representatives from Worlds of Wonder ended up making over $1 million a year in commission.
Whoa.
So Nintendo eventually had to put caps on them. Like, you can make $1 million a year in commission and that's it. The thing was it was super easy to be a salesman there. And you could go to any store and just be like, look, I got 50,000 NESs. This is the example used in the book. I got 50,000 NESs. You want to buy them? Okay, cool. I'll just take my commission now. So they just sat back and they didn't have to do any selling because the thing sold itself.
Yeah.
So in 1987, not realizing that Teddy Ruxpin was kind of done at this point, Worlds of Wonder bought so much Teddy Ruxpin dolls to try to sell that they ended up going bankrupt because the fad was over. No, they couldn't sell them. And so they ended up just drowning themselves in these bears.
Oh, I mean, drowning in teddy bears wouldn't be a bad way to go.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not a terrible way to go.
Worse.
And anyway, at this point, Nintendo kind of figured out, look, we can do this on our own. The NES sells itself. We don't need Worlds of Wonder to get these things into stores. We can do it ourselves. And so that is sort of the launch of the NES and the start of Nintendo's revival of the video game industry. They were about to, I don't want to say single-handedly bring things back, but
it was getting rolling.
Yeah, the world was definitely a different place because of Nintendo.
Would you say the world was beginning to be full of wonder?
Indeed. And then they went out of business. So, whoops.
Well, next week we'll get started with this new revival of video games.
Yeah, so because we've got the NES now, there of course needs to be some competition, and we got some new challengers on the horizon.
A new challenger approaches.
That's right. And this is going to be, this rivalry between Sega and Nintendo is going to be the fiercest rivalry probably in the history of video games, like ever. Like, I know Xbox and PlayStation fighting it out right now, but like, there's some real backhanded cutthroat stuff going on.
Bananas.
Yeah.
It's going to be bananas.
It's going to be bananas. So anyway, next week, we're going to talk about the birth of Sega and how they go from a small coin-op business to video game.
Do you want to hear my impression real quick?
Yeah.
Sega.
Nice. You want to hear mine?
Yeah, do it.
Sega!
Very good.
Thanks.
That was good. Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
What you been playing?
Well, keeping on the Destiny train, of course.
We just can't stop, won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop. We're probably going to raid tonight. So I've been playing a lot of Destiny. I haven't really played my Splinter Cell in a week, probably. I'm kind of debating on whether I want to start over and play on Xbox because Conviction is now free on Games with Gold.
That's right.
So
I already got it. Picked it up.
Yeah, I may want to start. I'm not that far into it, so it might be worth starting over because the PC port is just not awesome.
Not doing it for you?
It's not great. The controls are kind of wonky, and I don't know. I'm just not feeling it as much as I felt the other ones. Been playing. I actually started a new character on World of Warcraft. Speaking of WoW,
I kind of want to do this with you. I kind of want to play WoW. I never really played it.
Hey, first hit's free, buddy. Free to level 20.
It's fun?
It's all right so far. The leveling experience, so my main problem with this is like the fantasy of the end game, like raiding in World of Warcraft, is so different from what you do at the beginning of the game that like if you're trying to bring somebody new into it, you're like, yeah, but later on, like 200 hours into this game, it's going to be really fun. At the start, I need you to go and get spider butts.
You're going to play all by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you can play with other people, but like you're just walking around talking to people with exclamation marks on their head, getting the spider butts they need, bringing them back to them, making your level go up. And it's like not exactly riveting gameplay or fun. And the story is a lot of text. So maybe there's something good there, but like I'm not reading it. So.
It's not a good economy when it's built entirely on spider butts.
Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty of spider butts in this economy. So, like, the dream is that I will get to raiding capacity during the next expansion that's coming out. That's what sort of precipitated this Battle for Azeroth that's coming out. And, like, I want to get to where I can play with my buddies. And you can do these 10-man raids that are really fun. And I'm like, man, but I have a hard enough time getting 6 people together to play Destiny. How am I going to get 10 of my buddies together to play some World of Warcraft?
It is kind of crazy that now, like, playing video games requires you to get so many people together.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's like trying to get friends to go all out to dinner at the same time. It's like that.
Yeah, it's
difficult.
tough. So I mean, I have fun because you're leveling pretty quickly in the beginning, and like it's a nice, like it's super relaxing because nothing is stressful, you know. And then once you get to the point where you can run dungeons, which I'm not quite there yet, then it becomes this cool like dungeon runner of like constantly getting loot drops and like picking up gear and like always getting more powerful. Unlike a game like Destiny, though, World of Warcraft takes like months to hit the level cap, whereas Destiny is like you can get there in a weekend if you.
I like that Destiny's fast.
Yeah, I part of me likes that. The other part of me is like, why do we even have a leveling process if it really means nothing, right? Mm-hmm. In World of Warcraft, when you are level 110 or whatever the cap is now, like that means something. It means you put in the time to get to this point.
Everyone's like, look at this guy.
Right.
Looking
and
good.
There's plenty to do after you hit that cap, but like when the expansion drops, it's going to take people a couple of weeks probably to get to level cap, except for the really crazy people who will do it super fast. But like for most people, it will take that. When like a new expansion drops for Destiny, people get there in a weekend.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Yeah,
like maybe not even. Like I got from 20 to 25 when Curse of Osiris came out, probably the same day Curse of Osiris came out. It's like, why does this leveling even matter?
Yeah, it doesn't even really need to be in there.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm having fun playing World of Warcraft, and that's kind of where I'm at now.
I'm playing Pokemon Ultra Moon still.
Oh, yeah.
Played it in the car with Tyler on a little road trip.
Oh, yeah. I played my Pokemon Alpha Sapphire, too. I got a couple hours in that.
Yeah, we had a fun time playing Pokemon in the back seat.
Yep.
While the other people were social while we played
Pokemon.
Nintendo. Yeah.
I was doing Wonder Trades. I was being social.
That was cool. I love Wonder Trades.
Yeah. I had it tethered up to my phone, and I was just like I'm like hoping somebody's going to give me a level 100, whatever, Mew, too. It'd just be really exciting.
Give me a hacked Pokemon.
Yeah, look, I don't need to know it's hacked. I can have plausible deniability when you send me a level 100 Mewtwo, but I'm not going to hack it myself.
That's right. Plus, those Pokemon, they're like your children.
Right.
You love them.
That's right.
So you don't want to think of them as being
artificially created.
Yeah. They're real to you.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing, and I've been playing Destiny with Tyler, and I'm thinking about trying to pick up Mass Effect Andromeda. I still can't do it. I'm having such a hard time because there's so much fun stuff going on in Destiny right now.
Yeah, and when Age of Triumph hits.
Oh, man. I don't know when I'm going to jump into this Mass Effect Andromeda game, but hopefully it'll be soon.
Yeah, I wish you could just pause time and play all the games.
Oh, yeah, there's not enough time.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for listening today. And thank you also to whoever gave us we got 2 new ratings to bring us up to 5, which was very nice. I can't see your name, so I can't thank you, but I'm going to make up your names right now. Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks so much.
Yep. Appreciate
for doing that.
Yep.
We appreciate it. If you want to rate and review and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen, that would mean the world to us. Mm-hmm. I am on Twitter at @mecoletta.
And I am on Twitter at SneakerElf. That's ELPH.
And you can also email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. And I think that's pretty much it.
That's all we got for this week.
Great time today. Thank you so much, Tyler, for telling me the story of the second part of the Nintendo Entertainment System saga.
I'm very excited for you to start telling me the birth of Sega.
Oh, I'm excited too. Next week.
I want to remind people we are reading still in The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen L. Kent. A lot of our sources is from this. We occasionally branch out to other sources, but that's pretty much where a lot of this comes from.
That's where we're getting our structure.
Yeah. Please read the book because it's awesome. It's like $5 on Kindle. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and they have a cool picture part in the middle we just hit.
Oh, yeah.
A little fun little picture. You can look at all the pictures of all these nerds we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Look at all these nerds.
It's funny, too, because the book came out in like 2001. So it's like the last picture in this picture thing is like a picture of the Xbox, and it's like Microsoft's upcoming Xbox console, like the first Xbox. So once we get to there, it's going to be a little bit harder for us to keep a good structure, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll hit that bridge when we get to it.
That's
hit
right.
the bridge, cross it.
Cross it.
You don't hit bridges.
Nope.
Leave bridges alone. They didn't do anything to you.
That's right.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I am Mike Coletta once again.
And I'm Tyler Osby, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been a Potaholics Comedy Network presentation. Potaholics.com